For over 18 years, Saul Canelo Alvarez has captured the imagination of fight fans across the world and has created a huge legacy in boxing that only a select few have ever achieved. Canelo's native country of Mexico has a rich and long tradition in boxing in creating no-nonsense, entertaining fighting styles with the likes of Julio Cesar Chavez, Ricardo Lopez, and Manuel Marquez, just to name a few. And there's no denying he's one of the greatest Mexican fighters to lace up a pair of boxing gloves. But with Canelo's last three performances, he's not put in the caliber of performance we are used to. But with Alvarez signing this 3-fight deal with PBC, I want to look at what this means for Canelo's career, the potential matchups that could be on the cards, and the pros and cons of the deal. So on that note, let's get right into it. Even though Canelo isn't done just yet and still has unfinished business within the sport, his career up until this point has been nothing short of remarkable. He's won multiple world championships in 4 weight classes, from light middleweight all the way to light heavyweight, and Canelo is the first and only ever boxer in history to become an undisputed champion at super middleweight. And despite his early career loss to Floyd Mayweather Jr. and his most recent loss to Dimitri Bivol, Alvarez has given us some very entertaining fights over the years and has 39 knockouts to his name. And in today's market, Canelo still remains arguably boxing's biggest pay-per-view star and has become one of the most well-known names in combat sports. And during the last 2 years, Canelo has been working obviously closer with promoter Eddie Hearn of Matchroom Sports to make these big fights happen. And together they put on some incredible bouts, filling up stadiums and breaking records. For example, when he fought Billy Joe Saunders, he broke the record for the largest indoor boxing event in the United States, with 73,000 people in attendance on the night. For now, it looks like those memories created with Hearn and Matchroom are a thing of the past, and this time in the form of a 3-fight deal with promotional company PBC. But what is the structure of this contract? And most importantly, what does this mean for Canelo's career going forward? Since the closing stages of that multi-fight deal with Matchroom, there's been rumours and whispers surrounding Canelo's future. And although his loss to Dimitri Bivol last year was undoubtedly a dent in his near-perfect career so far, the options for Canelo still remain as promising as ever as the face of boxing. In terms of reasoning for leaving Matchroom, the first issue to point out is of course the rematch with Bivol. Several problems have been rumoured as to why Eddie Hearn couldn't get the fight made, but it seems though the weight at which the fight would be at and price demands of Bivol and Canelo were at opposite ends of the spectrum, effectively putting a firm halt to any negotiations.
Can you get that over the line? What's your first move on Monday morning?
Well, we're speaking non-stop. I think, look, I understand everybody's position. Dimitri Bivol would like to challenge for the 168-pound championship, but at the same time, Canelo Alvarez has only interest in defeating Dimitri Bivol on the same terms, because he believes he'll only get credit on those terms. And I agree with him as well, but I understand Dimitri's point of view. That is the biggest fight by a mile for Dimitri Bivol. I hope that he accepts the challenge. Canelo Alvarez gave him the opportunity. This time it's almost Dimitri Bivol giving Canelo the opportunity. He's desperate for revenge. He's the ultimate competitor.
Where are we at now? Has there been any contact with Canelo's team about any negotiation for this rematch? Where are we at with it?
We are nowhere with with the fight against Canelo, to be honest. And he talks about, I want a rematch. Okay, you want a rematch, and you do nothing for this rematch.
Why do you think he doesn't want to fight at his own weight against you and defend his belt?
I don't know why. Maybe because it's he wanna just try again. He wanna just take another chance to get my belt, but he doesn't want to risk his belt because it's a risk for him.
In recent interviews, Eddie Hearn has remained confident that his promotional companies would retain the Mexican superstar given the strong relationship they had developed over the last 2 years. However, on this occasion, Eddie Hearn and the rest of the boxing world would be maybe taken by surprise at Canelo's next move, signing with PBC for a deal worth a staggering $100 million US, which in my opinion is a huge win for PBC and Al Haymon. Considering this year they've also put on some huge fights in Ryan Garcia versus Tank Davis, Benavidez versus Plant, and of course the upcoming Errol Spence and Terence Crawford fight. But in terms of dates we can expect, a September 16th matchup on Mexican Independence Day against the current WBC middleweight champion Jermall Charlo, while Cinco de Mayo 5th of May next year will be a likely date for our next opponent, while September next year will probably be expected for the third fight. But of course, this has led to a wave of discussion across social media in terms of potential matchups for the Mexican. With all things considered, this could be the most pivotal 3 fights of Canelo Alvarez's career, and some might say his recent performances has shown early signs of decline. So these next 3 fights could really be make or break for the boxing superstar. As just discussed, it does seem like the end of an era and partnership for Canelo Alvarez and Eddie Hearn, but now it's a new chapter, a new beginning for the Mexican. So, what are the potential options for Canelo, and who could we see him fight over the next couple of years? Well, the first up is of course Jermall Charlo, and seems to be a done deal and scheduled for September 16th, but is yet to be officially confirmed. And with Charlo not fighting for over 2 years, this in my opinion could be a straightforward victory for Canelo Alvarez. However, that's not to say Jermall Charlo is a complete punching bag and has been a world champion since 2015, putting on some pretty good performances along the way. However, the recent lack of activity is a concern for me, and it just seems like a sensible fight for Canelo to take before he dives into the big fight we all want. And that is of course the undefeated super middleweight star David Benavidez. And for some time now, fans have been calling out for this, and even David himself.
Performance. Where do you think you are, and what are you looking at?
I mean, I think it's an easy question. I think everybody wants to see me against Canelo, right?
Canelo
I definitely want that fight against Canelo. I feel like that's the fight that the fans don't want to see. They've been calling it for a long time, and I've been a mandatory for a long time, so let's get it.
And now, with both names under the PBC banner, this fight is surely easier to get made now. Benavidez has an aggressive, vicious style with quick combinations and deadly counterpunching, with many fans believing the former super middleweight champion could indeed be the kryptonite to arguably a fading Canelo Alvarez. However, for many years I've said Canelo should take this fight sooner rather than later. As for me, Benavidez is improving each fight, while it seems the opposite for Canelo Alvarez. But this is definitely an exciting fight of experience versus youth, which could still go either way for many. If Canelo was to lose the first fight, there's always the opportunity for a rematch in the following September if Benavidez and Canelo fight on Cinco de Mayo. Another fighter who's under the PBC banner is the unified welterweight champion Errol Spence Jr. And even though this is a big if, and if Spence does manage to come through that blockbuster fight with Terence Crawford this year, the fight against Canelo would make incredible viewing. And when asked in past interviews, Spence has always maintained that he'd be willing to make the step up in weight to take on Canelo Alvarez.
We're not thinking about Canelo right now, but I mean, if the fight come across the table, you know, I definitely take that fight. You know, I feel like, you know, 165, 168, that's more my natural weight, and it's a lot easier for me to make. So I definitely take that fight.
And if I'm being honest, I would be intrigued to see how Errol Spence would get on moving up to face a naturally much bigger man in Alvarez, and if Spence could even perform at that weight too. Another fight that seems to be maybe flying under the radar at the moment is possibly a matchup with the undefeated American fighter Demetrius Andrade, and their post-fight press conference spat after the Billy Joe Saunders fight that went viral across social media potentially makes this an interesting matchup too.
Man, you fight with nobody. Hey, you are a champion, but are you?
You avoided that.
Hey, you fight with nobody.
But apart from his impressive performance against Quigley in 2021, he's only had one fight this year and has remained largely inactive. But the fact this pair have a seemingly mutual dislike for each other, it could make this fight an exciting clash. And lastly, we can't forget about David Morrell Jr., a Cuban southpaw who goes against the typical outboxer defensive approach, who instead has been giving the fans what they want, and in most cases, blood and knockouts. And with him being the WBA regular champion and under the PBC banner, there's always the possibility that a mandatory could be called on Canelo to take this fight. However, in my opinion, stylistically, I think he would be a nightmare for Canelo Alvarez. And I even think Benavidez needs to be careful about facing someone like him. But in terms of styles and how these fights could all play out, you'd have to say the most fan-friendly matchup and fight that would make the most money would be against Benavidez. It may also be the most logical move for Canelo too, but regardless of what you think about who would win each of these fights, every fight in my opinion could be exciting and even legacy defining. After a hard-fought victory against John Ryder in Guadalajara, it became evident that Matchroom was struggling to find the viable options for Canelo. And after failed negotiations for the rematch with Dimitri Bivol, Canelo's decision to sign with PBC seemed like the right move. But let's delve into the pros and cons of this deal. One undeniable advantage of this deal is Canelo stands to earn a significant amount of money, as the PBC deal offered the opportunity for substantial financial gains, and not to mention, Saul could earn even more with this deal with things like pay-per-view and further exposure. It's clear ever since Canelo left Golden Boy that Canelo has wanted to be a fighter who fights consistently, and with this deal, he can mentally prepare for 3 fight dates while maintaining his momentum and staying in top form so he can do his best to try and win. And finally, just joining forces with PBC, Canelo gains access to some of the best fighters in his division, and Canelo has always been open about adding to his legacy. Furthermore, had Canelo remained with Matchroom and DAZN, the likelihood of securing these fights, such as Canelo Benavidez or Spence, would have significantly been reduced. As we all know as boxing fans, promoters, networks often present obstacles in trying to arrange such fights. Therefore, the move to PBC simplifies this process and increases the chances of the matchups we all want to see. However, there are some cons maybe to this deal, and of course, I guess one of the downsides of Canelo signing this PBC deal is it diminishes the possibility of him ever getting the Bivol rematch. And although Bivol isn't technically tied up with Matchroom, but rather another promoter with DAZN, there still could be significant challenges in the negotiations around making this fight happen on the PBC platforms. And there's always the possibility now he could never get that rematch. And could this be a dark shadow on his overall legacy? And of course, there's always the risk of the PBC politics within there. With so many fighters wanting a shot at Canelo, could this cause issues with certain fights getting made? Or even PBC favouring their own fighters over Canelo? Time will very much tell. With all the options on the table, in my opinion, this was probably the best of the rest. And going by the reported figures, it probably is the most lucrative deal on the table. And money aside, Canelo now has 3 guaranteed fights. Not only that, every one of those 3 fights has the chance to create yet even more history for his iconic career. And it's looking like his fight fans will finally get the best possible matchups. I'd love to hear your opinions in the comments below. Do you think this is the right deal for Canelo Alvarez? And what fight do you want to see most? I'd love to know. This has been Jamie from Boxing Life. Thank you so much for watching. If you want more like this, why not check out my videos on Canelo Alvarez. As always guys, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.